Afternoon, morning, whatever it is in your time while you're watching this video. My name is Amy Derrick, and this is my husband, Michael, and we are here to lead you through developing a resilient mindset. Okay, so you may notice that we are in an abnormal setting for this. Uh, we got invited to minister here at this conference early on during the week, and then had some medical things that came up. But felt the Holy Spirit wanted to get this message out there to pastors and to leaders who have media teams that may be struggling in the area of resiliency. And so Michael's going to take over from here, and we're going to move quickly through this presentation because we believe that God has a word for us at the end.
So my background is in technology. For the last 28 years, I have focused on building resilient networks. And so the features and the functions that I put into these resilient networks is it's really what I was originally going to teach on. Because the original topic in the class that they might have had out there for you to sign up for was technology resilience. I'm still going to cover those points, those keys that you use to make technology more resilient. But as I was putting this presentation together, I felt like God said, throw it out. We've got something new. And he showed me how the framework that I used for resilient networks and for making technology more resilient also applies to people. And so this presentation you're about to see is nothing fancy. I didn't have a chance to go through and brand it for the class or for the conference, put my own branding on it, anything. In fact, we just finished it a few minutes ago. It's a little after 4 on Saturday morning. And so, it's a very raw, unpolished presentation. But I believe that this is, like Amy said, this is something that we feel like God has for the media leaders, media teams, and even for pastors that are trying to develop a media team. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. You will have to pardon. There might be some glitches in this because, like she said, we are in a hospital. We're using one of those little hospital carts to hold the laptop, and so just please bear with us. So I'm sharing my screen now so that you can see what we're doing here. And so we are developing a resiliency mindset, creating a culture of resilience for your team. So you might not have ever thought about creating resilience. And so if you have and you failed at creating it, it's not your fault. A lot of times we think of resilience in a very limited way because when we're thinking about resilience in people, we're thinking about dealing with a lot of hard things. And it's hard sometimes to teach people how to deal with hard things. You learn how to deal with hard things by going through hard things.
Yeah.
And that's how you develop resilience. And so you don't really think about it on your team. But when you see this framework, you'll be able to see how you can build resilience in your team, not necessarily build resilience in the team members, but build resilience in your team. And so if you've been concerned in the past that you can't eliminate technical and personal issues, put those fears to rest because there are ways to do that. The enemy wants you to fail, but you can develop a team who worships God while serving your congregation. And then if you've ever thought the enemy wants you to fail, you're probably right. So there is always going to be opposition to media. And I'm going to kind of get off script for a second because when when you're in media, especially when you're recording services and you're posting it online for future people to see, the sermon that your pastor does, the music that your worship team leads people in, and when you record that and you post it online, not only will the people that were there in service see it, and those that were there live to watch it online will see it, but people will continue to see that for years or decades to come. And so the enemy wants to keep that from happening because he doesn't want that future message or that message to touch someone in the future that's going to hit them at the time they need it most to impact their lives. And so the enemy is going to fight you because you're in media, because you're doing live sound reinforcement to make sure people hear the message, that makes sure that you're setting an atmosphere, where people can worship, where it's not too loud, but it's not too soft, where you're balancing things out. You're getting the lights the right way so that people can enter into worship. The enemy wants you to fail because the biggest distraction in a church is usually sound or lights.
Mhm.
And so, and then followed by your pro presenter or PowerPoint or whatever you use to do
Awkward
your,
cameraman.
yeah, or awkward cameraman. There's things that, that get in there, but the biggest distractions is going to be sound and lighting. Um, and whenever you're doing broadcast, then it could also be, your band is too close to the original songs. And so Facebook, kills your stream because they're like, oh, it's copyright infringement. You're playing a song. Well, no, our band is just that good, or, um, other technical things that can happen that will be distractions for your online community. But the enemy is going to go after you. And so just expect it and plan to deal with it when it happens. And so that's part of being resilient is expecting issues and having a plan in place to resolve those issues. And that's what we're going to teach you today is how to build resilience. So my goal for this class, I want to give you strategies to develop a team who worships God while serving your in-house and online congregation. Give you strategies to have a smoother technology experience without failing to serve God with everything. Because one thing that will distract you from worshiping God is having problems with technology
Mhm.
because your mind is not on worshiping God at that moment. It's on, I got to fix this. And so if you have a plan to fix it quickly, then you can get back on worship because no matter what you do, your number one thing in a service is not running media. It's not doing cameras, lights, sound, whatever. Your number one responsibility in a service is to worship God. So the next thing that I want to do is uh, give you strategies to prevent mishandling the people that you're leading, because that will lead to burnout. Um, and then we want to give you strategies to avoid misusing technology, because if you've ever tried to use something for a purpose that it's not meant to be, you know how much stress that causes. So, how are we going to reach these goals? The best way that I have found for you to develop a team who worships God while serving your online audience and having better technology experience is through creating a culture of resilience. Now, this framework, like I said, God just showed me how to apply this to people. I've been teaching my team, to follow this framework on the technology side. And we've imparted to our team that, hey, if you need to go worship, someone else will cover your position.
Yeah.
Go. And so as we start going through these key points, um, you can start seeing how you can apply them to your team so that you can be resilient and your team can worship God. Um, And so, like I was just saying, the way I've accomplished this is through teaching the resiliency mindset. We just put a fancy name on it today, um, but this is something we've been teaching our team for, the last couple of years. So how does this apply to you? Church technology is just like business, or just like a business. You're rarely prepared for failures. And for the last 28 years, I've worked in business, dealing with networks and dealing with technology, and no company is really prepared for failure. Um, Churches often don't know what to prepare for to prevent failures. And so, if you've been in media for a long time, you've experienced a lot of failures. And so you have an idea of what all to do. But if you're new to media, you might not know what to expect. So we're going to go through looking at some of the things that you can uh, start looking for and start preparing for. Um, and then we're only human. Sometimes you need to look out for yourself and the people and your people to make sure that they are resilient and they're not getting worn out. Um, and so burnout is very real. Uh, and so you have to avoid burnout as much as possible. And so when when you're looking at sorry, if we look over, we are still here in the hospital, and we see people walking by, and we don't know if they're about to come in here to do vitals or anything else. Um, but you have to take care of yourself. Um, and so look for any type of sign that someone is getting worn out, that they're getting burned out. They might be showing up later and later to practices or to service. They might just not be as into it anymore. Um, look for things like that so that you can help your team out. So what we're going to cover today are three key points. Key number one is how much failure can you accept? In technology, we call it fault tolerance. Number two, resilience starts with redundancy. And so in technology, redundancy means that you have two devices covering where one device would work. Well, with people, you have people that can cover multiple roles or that can fill in for each other. Number three, how to build high availability into your culture and equipment. Um, so now, what amount of failure can you accept? So when I first started in media, I wasn't really trying to start in media. I had just started going to a young adults group and I played guitar and I wanted to join the band. And so when they introduced me to the worship leader, he said, "Well, you're still new to this group, and so why don't you work with the sound man first? And after you've been here for a while, then you can join our band." And so he introduced me to their sound guy, and I helped him tear down that night because it was a Wednesday night. We just finished service, and so I helped him tear down. And he told me to be back on Tuesday, and that he would help me, learn how to do the stuff. So Tuesday rolls around, and he's not there. He's a no call, no show. And all of a sudden, I'm having to set up a sound system for the first time, and I'd never done it before. And so um, it set me down a path where I ended up learning media and never really joined their band because uh, I became the new sound man and I had never ran sound before. So I learned how to set up the system and get everything going, but it taught me a valuable lesson. When someone is burned out and they see a ray of light that someone else might take over that role and they might not have to do it all the time, then they're out of there because they're already burnt out. When someone is at that point, there's really no chance of helping them out. So you want to find that early and try to prevent it.
And we've seen that when we transitioned on becoming the media directors of a small church that we work at, Covenant Life. We saw that in the team that was there. And it's like, as soon as we came in and we began filling some of the roles and responsibilities, or making changes to the culture and how we operate, it, the exit door was spinning, and it got down to where it was just he and I. And so understand this, that when you come in and you try to change things, you may have people who just walk out.
Yeah.
And it may be just you for a bit. But we're gonna get into that even further down the line, as building your team, and characteristics that you want to do that show you a resilient person that's coming into that culture that already carries that light.
So when I joined the next team, they basically asked me to just take over running sound and train everyone. They had a team that knew nothing about sound, but they had 3 or 4 guys that were willing to do it, and did it on a regular basis. But it was back in analog days, and it was nothing but feedback and issues. And so I got in there and I worked with them, trained them, and we ended up having a really good team. Um, then at another church, I tried to join their media team, but they were focused on production. The pastor was incredible, loved listening to him. The worship team was just phenomenal. The when it came to ministry that happened in the church, it was excellent. But when it came to being part of the media team, it was all about the production. And that's not what your heart should be. It should not be about producing a great atmosphere. It should be entering into the atmosphere of worship. And the way I enter in and worship is running sound, or the way I worship is doing this or that. It's not, I'm there for production. And so that's something, for you to even think about. Are you into doing media for a production, or are you doing media to worship God? And so when I joined the media team at Covenant Life, I was just there to serve. I didn't want to do anything else. And the pastor came up and asked me to take on more and more responsibility. And whenever the guy that was leading broadcast left, he asked me to take on broadcast. I knew sound. I didn't know cameras. I didn't know lighting. I didn't know any of the other stuff, and so I had to learn all of that. Um, but we had a team to work with, and we were able to develop them. Had some people leave, um, but we've had a lot of people come in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of change, and it's been incredible to see what God's done. So when it comes to fault tolerance, or how much failure you're willing to deal with, how much is too much? So fault tolerance is really at the heart of resilience. A person who is resilient can handle a lot of stuff. My wife and our daughter are great examples. Over the last 3 weeks, um, my wife was attacked by a swarm of bees, um, ended up in the ER with anaphylaxis. Um, then the next day, we go out in the backyard, or it might have been 2 days later. We were in the backyard trying to move some stuff around. She lifts up a bag and starts to reach down, and I'm like, snake, back up. And so she backs up, and it was a what was it, copperhead.
Mhm.
So we had to call someone to come out and remove the snake. Um, then we tried to get exterminators to deal with the bees that attacked her, and all of the exterminators were like, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. And a couple of them were like, just burn it down, because we knew where the bees were coming from. It's coming from a structure on our property. And they said, just burn it down because there's no way to get to where those bees are, or to safely get there. And a bee suit won't protect you. And so we had someone come over that said they knew how to safely burn it down. And we ended up about 5 minutes later calling the fire department out to put out the fire. Um, and then right after that, her gallbladder decides to act up, and we have to rush her to the ER and find out she needs to have surgery. And so we had scheduled it for next week, and then ended up having to go uh, rush her into the ER again just a couple of days ago. Um, and here we are post-op. She's trying to recover from that, but she has gone through so many things, you know, and we won't even get into, all the stuff that's happened before. But I have saw her be resilient in so many ways that, you know, that type of resilience isn't something that can be taught. It's only something that's developed. And when you want to develop resilience in a person, you can't.
Yeah.
They have to go through hard times to build it in themselves. But in your team, you can build resilience. And so we're going to go through that here in a little bit. Um, And so you might be a resilient person, um, but resilience can break down. And so the longer you're having to deal with the tough stuff, the longer that you're the only sound man running the soundboard, um, you start getting burned out, and then you get burnout, and then you're way past burned out, and you finally have someone else that steps up to do it, and you're like, I don't want to touch that soundboard again, and I'm out of here. Um, And so you need to, really keep an eye out for that and try to help your team um, avoid ever getting close to burnout. You know, have conversations with people. Sometimes you have to have a tough conversation and be like, you know, I know you don't want to worship in any other way. You just want to do this, but it looks like you're burnt out. You really need to take some time off. And it might be a hard conversation to have, but the hard conversations is where you sometimes can get to the heart of an issue and help your team, because your job is not there to have a perfect media department. Your job as the leader is to be the pastor of that. That's your small group. That's your church. You are leading these people, and you need to have a heart of worship and heart of service to your people. So sometimes you're like, I don't know how to define how much failure or issues we can tolerate. I don't know how to determine what failures we could possibly have. Uh, I don't know how to identify areas we need to expect problems. Well, when when you start looking at what failures and issues you can tolerate, um, first, talk to your pastor, talk to your elders, talk to the church leadership, find out what they can tolerate. When we spoke to our pastor, he said, "My concern is not that we have a streaming video on Sunday mornings. My concern is not that everything looks great and it's well produced." He said, "My concern is your heart and is your soul." Excuse me. And so he said that if we need to set our camera angle and just have one camera, set it widescreen and record it and then just upload it to YouTube and Facebook, then set the one camera, get it ready, and just go with it. And so at that point, it let us know that, according to our pastor, we got a big wide area that we could fail in, and it'll be perfectly fine.
Mhm.
Um,
As long as we are pursuing Christ with everything.
right.
So long as we are putting ourselves we are bringing that corporate anointing with us.
Yeah.
And we are doing the things that we need to
We're
do
entering into worship.
in private that bring that with us. And, you know, our level of tolerance for failure prior to that was very low. Okay. We would get really frustrated or irritated when things didn't go right, when we forget to record, to the thumb drive, when a program fails or a camera angle goes bad, we would get a little perfectionist about it. And through really the guidance of our pastors and the understanding of submission to authority, we began shifting our focus because our church wants to be a church where you are being introduced daily to God.
Yeah, we want to take the church from going to church weekly to being the church daily.
Yeah.
We want to daily enter into the word, worship, and witness. And so that's kind of the heart of our church. And so because it wasn't all about the production, and it was all about our heart posture and our relationship with God, it changed how we defined issues and how we defined failure. Um, Now, we still want to do everything to the best of our abilities, and we want to do it as unto God. And so that's where now Pastor says, this is what my tolerance is. So we can't go, and be more tolerant than him, but we can be, a lot less tolerant to failure. And so we can go in and look at the areas that we want to not tolerate issues. And the Bible really does give us what our tolerance should be about personal issues. So the truth is, failures can be planned for, and processes can be written to correct failures quickly. A real quick example. I had told my team that if we turn on our streaming media server early, that it has a bad habit of hanging up in the middle of service. And so we turn it on about 10 minutes before service starts. We get it all connected and get the stream up to Facebook, and we'll be perfectly fine. And so a week or two ago, I get a text message during the middle of service, and I head upstairs, and they had realized, in between the time they sent me the text message and that I got upstairs, that, oh yeah, we just need to reboot the media server. So they rebooted it because they had started it before band practice, and so it hung up partway through the service. So they restarted it, and once they restarted, everything connected, and they were back to streaming. But because they knew about that issue, they had a process in place, and so they were able to recover quickly. And so by the time I got upstairs, it was all recovered. Um, and so, and like I said earlier, when it comes down to personnel issues and failures, the Bible explains how we're supposed to do that. Paul is very explicit in Timothy on how to deal with moral failures, and personal failures. Um, and so the truth is, it's right there in the Bible for us. And we're blessed to be at a church that does, follow that. And they do, um, they do bring correction when it's needed. And so, um, if your church doesn't, then that's something to take home, to look at, how Paul really talks about dealing with, um, with immoral brothers, or with dealing with someone that has wronged someone else, or who has sinned, and because it's all about correcting them and bringing them back into relationship with God and back into relationship with the church. So, key number 2. So, one is fault tolerance. That really lets you decide what needs to be redundant and what needs to not be. And so resilience starts with redundancy. So once you've defined what faults you can accept, then you have to say, okay, since we can't accept these faults, how do we deal with it? Do we need to have redundant hardware? Do we need, extra batteries? Do we need to have a process where we change batteries just before service? What do we need to do? And so, um, some people think redundancy means having, lots of spares of equipment. Not necessarily. Um, we don't need backup equipment. We're too small. So, some churches are like, well, we're too small for it. We don't need to have redundancy. Um, some people are like, well, we'll just wing it if something happens. Most of the time, that's how you start off.
Mhm.
You're like, we'll wing it if there's a problem. Well, creating a culture of resiliency, um, many media departments don't have a budget, or if they have one, it's small. Um, Not everything has to be redundant. Some things need a spare, others don't. Um, I have never seen a church that has a spare soundboard sitting by so
Mhm.
that if their soundboard dies, they can just swap it out. That's way too expensive. But you might have an amp and a microphone sitting there so that if your soundboard dies in the middle of service, or power amp or speaker or whatever, if something has a problem during service, then you just pull out the amp and the mic and the pastor can continue preaching. You know, if you're doing your worship set, well, if they were doing everything from tracks, then go a cappella. If they have acoustic instruments, then do an acoustic worship set. Um, you know, there's ways to get around things. And so if you have a plan in place, then you can recover. If you don't, then everyone's panicking. And so panic isn't good for any of us. It's just stress. And so church is not supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to be a time where you go to worship God. And so if failures happen and you don't have if you're not prepared for it, then it's a bit harder and you are more likely to panic. So identify items that are too expensive to have a spare. Find out what you can use if that were to fail. Um, have a backup plan. Um, Now, here's where it gets to your people. Some roles can overlap, or people can handle multiple roles. Find ways to help your team avoid burnout. So, um, basically cross train people,
Mhm.
have them trained in multiple areas so that, um, 1 week a month they're able to sit with their family in the service. And another week they might run soundboard. And the next week they might be upstairs, or be in your broadcast booth. The next week they might be running lights. And then they're back to sitting with their family again. And so have a rotation, where people can rotate in and out, you know.
See, and the other way that we've helped our team to avoid burnout is we've done worship nights at our home. And we'll pull out the guitars, light a fire, and spend time in worship as a team. Because I mean, those that pray together, stay together, right? We need to pray, we need to play, we need to have that community and that intimacy, closeness of relationship where they feel heard and
Heard and known.
heard and known. And I think that's the whole thing is we have to value the people who are serving us in this ministry. We also have to place such great value on a relationship with the Lord that those things don't collide. So we're not being just doers of the word, and I know the word of God says to be a doer of the word. Here's the word and doers, my thing is sometimes we get into the do that we're not spending the time sitting at his feet being filled up and recharged so we can pour out to our team.
Okay.
And then our team's experiencing burnout because you're burnout.
Yeah. And it's the whole Mary and Martha thing. You know, one is sitting there preparing, the other sitting at his feet. And
I tend to be a
third,
Martha. And so, so do you. And
yeah,
that's our tendency, is to work. And that's why we have served in different churches. Um, I mean, I've been serving in different churches since I was 17 years old. And so yeah, that's a long time. That's 30 years.
yeah. And so the thing is, your top priority isn't to have a great media production. Your top priority is to worship God.
Yeah.
You're not there to, you know, um, serve this incredible experience. You're there to serve God and to serve the people there that you're leading.
Your excellence in your media program is going to be a byproduct of your excellence in leading them in the Lord. Okay, because then every act they do is anointed. They're hearing from the Holy Spirit, their intuition changes. All of a sudden, you're getting views from cameras that you weren't getting before. They're actively engaged in what's happening on that screen, because they're engaged in worship. And so the focus of our ministry here at Covenant Life has had to shift. It had to shift. We had to shift into worship, had to shift into mentorship and discipleship, because our team wasn't there. And how could we expect them to be there? We weren't there. So God had to take us to some deeper places in order to get us prepared for us to be able to lead people into this area.
And so one of the main things that you have to do is first for yourself, have daily encounters with God,
Mm-hmm.
and then really push that as part of your culture for your team to have daily encounters with God, because that will help avoid burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then this is a key takeaway. So please, understand my heart on this. Realize that you and your team are irreplaceable. No one can do what you do the way you do it, but every role is replaceable.
Yes.
Your role, your sound man, everyone, your lighting, every person's role is replaceable. So you can have 3 or 4 people filling a role. You can train them so that they fill that role very similarly. They're going to each have their own twists, their own takes on how to mix sound or how to do lighting, but they're going to all do it very similarly because they've been taught to do it similarly. You're not creating robots, you are training people and you're pouring in and developing people. And so just know that if you're doing a good job, then any other leaders that you're working with, when you have to step back, you go on vacation, you take a sabbatical, your leaders should be able to step up and do just as good, if not better, than what you do, because you've been able to teach them, how to lead, and you've helped them avoid some of your pitfalls. And so if you do your job right, they might be better than you. And if that's the case, then you can go from a role of leading the team to now you're ministering to the team, and you're taking that role of a you know pastor of the media team instead of the director or the leader or whatever your title is, but start using it as a minister role. And then redundancy can be achieved creatively. And so as you build redundancy in your team, um, then and you build redundancy in some of your technology, some of your equipment. Um, be creative with it. Find ways that will work, that are acceptable to your leadership, because no matter what you think the solution should be, if your leadership isn't behind it, then it's not a solution. And so submit to your leadership and show them ways that, hey, if this happens, we would like to have this as our backup plan. That way you have redundancy in place. And so, real life example, a little over a month ago, we kind of stepped back from leading our media team at our church. We took a sabbatical, and our plan is to kind of step back in the end of this month, first part of next month, um, and start leading or resume leading our team. Well, we had identified someone that we thought would make a great leader, and when we had to step back, she was able to step up and take over for us. And in our absence, she's actually grown the team.
Mhm.
And so the team has gotten bigger. She's been training people. Um, she's done great. Um, in fact, she's probably grown the team more than we have over the last 2 years. She's done in the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, I'm come to find out, I mean, the beauty of it is she had stepped down out of that role. Okay, so before she had been worked and trained in this role and had been at this church for almost her whole life. And so when it came down to it, she was very familiar, knew all of the people, had great friends who were willing to support her in this role. And as leaders, we leverage that.
yeah.
Okay, so we leverage that. Now, we set the spiritual tone for the team. We set the standards, along with our pastors and elders of how that team is to function and operate and live their lives inside and outside of the church because their life needs to be congruent. And so those things and those aspects, we still, have input on, or if there's a problem with the team, but we were effectively able to step down from the daily needs of the team. And she came and filled that role. So understand this, you have to create a void sometimes for the need to be met. If there's no void, the need doesn't happen. And we stepped down really just out of obedience to the Lord to correct the heart posture that we were dealing with. And for me, it was it was that whole Martha experience. I mean, I didn't know what to do with myself when the Lord said, sit down. I mean, I'd walk into the church, I felt awkward. I had no idea what to do with myself. And I had to learn how to re engage in worship. I had to learn how to re engage in corporate worship. Worship at home was fine. I had to learn how to sit and be quiet and be still because I created such a lifestyle that we were working 5 days a week and then we were ministering 4 days a week. There was too much happening. And so we take this break. And I want that to be an example.
So now, sometimes you might be thinking, yeah, how does creating a culture of resilience in my team, what will that do? Um, I don't understand how it'll make things better. I don't know how it'll impact our congregation. Um, I don't know how it's going to make a difference in our team. Or you might be sitting there saying, I don't have a team. It's just me. Um, and if you don't have a team, it's just you. Um, there's a whole lot of need for redundancy there. Um, you know, and then you don't understand how it'll make worshiping God while you're serving any easier. Well, by having the redundancy and having extra people to fill in different roles, um, if someone needs to step away from their position, someone else can step up.
Mhm.
And so if you have redundancy, then that can happen. And so if that makes worshiping God easier. If I'm sitting there and I really feel like I need to go down to the altar, but I'm the only one that does this and it's a critical role, then I can't go to the altar because I've got to do this job. And so I start getting bitter and resenting that I have to do this job because I never can go down to the altar. But if there's other people that know how to do it, now I can go to the altar. because someone else can be there. And so the truth is redundancy doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't mean you have to have a huge team. It just means you have a team that's willing to cross-train, so that everyone can fill in for each other. Um, so how to build high availability into your culture and equipment. So high availability is something in technology that means basically um, if something were to stop working right, something else is right there and immediately takes over for it. Um, so it would be like having one of those mics that are just sitting right here at your face and a mic that you're holding in your hand. And the mic that you're holding in your hand goes out. And so the sound man just mutes that mic, unmutes the other one, and you keep on singing. That's highly available, but there's really no need in that. That's kind of more than what you need. But if you're trying to stream a service and your internet starts having problems and you want to be able to continue streaming, but you're having problems, you need to have another internet circuit so you have high availability. And that's the one plug that we will do for our business. Um, we have Method Network Solutions, and what we do is help build redundant, highly available networks, and we help people get new internet circuits, and we help with cybersecurity and all of that. And so, if you need any help with that, feel free to reach out to us. And we'll give you an email address at the end so that if you want to get a copy of this presentation, we can send you the presentation. Um, and if you want any information, we can do that as well. But high availability is something that really, in media, there's not a lot of ways that I know of to have high availability, but your people can be highly available.
Mhm.
And so, one way that we saw in Mercy Culture when we went there for a pastors conference was they actually have a position of a floater, and the floater knows all the different roles. So if someone has to go down to the altar, the floater just steps in and takes over. Um, but you might not have a floater. But if you have someone that knows the different roles that's sitting in the audience that doesn't feel the need to go down to an altar call, but they see someone that they know how to fill their role, leave the booth and go down to the altar, then they can just step up and take over. And that is essentially high availability on your team. And so by having multiple people trained to fill multiple positions, you can have a floater, or your team can just watch out for each other. And if the sound man sees that the person working pro presenter is stepping down, and they don't have to do anything on the soundboard at the moment, they can step over and work pro presenter or work PowerPoint or however you do your slides. And so building that redundancy in your roles allows you to build high availability in your team. And so now you've got a resilient team. Um, and so what it takes, what we've just discussed. And key point three, because it's mainly for, the team or for technology in corporate America, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Um, so technology is made highly available when you have a spare that takes over in moments. Internet is highly available when you have redundant, different types of internet services. So how it plays out in a church, we rotate multiple people in each of our positions. Some people might do the position once a month, some every other week, some it might be up to every 6 weeks. But everyone gets a chance to be in service and not always serving. One of the churches that I've helped out with, they were having problems with their internet, and it turned out that they were on broadband internet. And if you want to know more about why being on broadband internet for streaming can cause issues, feel free to reach out. I won't go into all the technical jargon on here, but they were having problems, so we had to get them a direct internet access. Um, and then have it set up where it fails over. So if their broadband started having issues, it would automatically fail over to their other. And so then they stopped having streaming issues. Um, Now, and this is where I'm kind of reinforcing, large corporations run everything with high availability, servers, switches, wireless, firewalls, internet. Um, but large corporations don't always have, high availability for their people.
Mhm.
They work one person doing one job, and there's no one else that can fill in for that job. You know, we're not like the world. Okay. Our our goal is not to work everything as hard as we can. This is not a job. We are the church, and the church is about the people. And so, um, keep your focus on having your people highly available so they can take care of each other. Um, so yeah, some people might be like, I can't buy extra gear. You don't have to make everything highly available. All you need to do is make your team highly available. And so we're going to stop sharing this presentation. Um, and so, um, we want to just share a few things, or I'm going to have Amy share a few things here with you.
Okay, so when we are talking to you right now, you as a pastor, okay, so shift your mindset from technology to people management and to your personal relationship with the Lord. Okay, so here are some of the scriptures that God has been putting on my heart and impressing on me as a leader in His church. We have certain standards, right? We have certain things that we are called to do, and be, and a lot of those standards that were created, say the standards in Titus chapter 1. You can flip over Titus chapter 1. I had it bookmarked and something happened. Okay. Um, yeah. When a person comes in and they are trying to become a part of your team, okay, under a pastor. Okay, so you as a leader need to examine yourselves and look at Titus chapter 1. An elder, okay, so a leader in the body must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe and who are not open to the charge of being wild or disobedient. Since the overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable to one who loves what is good and hates what is evil, who's self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refuse those who oppose it. So understand this, that there are standards that were set up for those who are going to serve the body of Christ. And when you find this and you look at this list, don't let it be a list of condemnation of all of the things that you don't do. Just understand that when you walk in John 15, when you are abiding in the vine and you are attached to Christ and your life source is coming from Him, that these things are a byproduct of that. So, what we're talking about is like when I look at my life and I see that some things are falling apart, some things aren't lining up with the scripture there in Titus. Sometimes I'm not self-controlled. Just stick a brownie and some ice cream in front of me and ask me how I know. I mean, sometimes I am not disciplined to get up, and when the Lord wakes me up, I ignore that call to worship and prayer. And so, what the Lord's been dealing with me on is, I am the true vine. My Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. With every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. This is where we have to live our daily life, is abiding in the vine. If we separate ourselves from him because of offense, because of unanswered prayer, because of resentment, because of hurt, because of church hurt, because of something someone said or did, if I allowed past abuse by my father to separate me from the love of the Father, which I have done, until the Lord restored that, I couldn't abide. I wasn't abiding because I couldn't handle the silence. The silence felt like rejection. The silence didn't feel like peace for me when God was offering me peace. It didn't feel like love for me when he was offering love. All I sensed was rejection. So I want to speak to that. If you're dealing with a spirit of rejection, if you're dealing with being separated from the vine, and you're trying to lead in that manner of Titus, and you're trying to force self-control and the fruits of the Spirit of God, then honey, you're burning yourself out because you weren't designed for that. You were designed for holy communion with a loving God the Father. And he wants to bring healing to that relationship so that you can serve the people God's called you to serve. Because the beautiful thing happens when you abide in the vine. He says, then I no longer call you servant, but I call you friend. You are my friends if you do what I command. Because a servant does not know the master's business. Instead, I've called you friends, and everything I have learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might bear fruit. So fruit that lasts. And whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command, to love one another. So when we begin staying in the vine and we separate ourselves from that rejection, from that hurt, from that pain, and we connect with the Father, what he gives us is in alignment with his word. What we ask for is in alignment with his heart and his purpose, and is in alignment with love. We receive from our Father who gives good gifts. So that was the word that I had for you, is that even as pastors, we can find ourselves in positions where we love God. We love Jesus. We are operating in the gifts of the Spirit. We are moving forward. We're doing things, but there's a disconnect somewhere when it comes to God the Father. And that disconnection from him prevents you from being able to lead your team in the manner that he's called you to. You know, I mean, when you go into Romans, and this is my last scripture and we'll close. Okay, when I go into Romans, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves, never lacking in zeal, but keeping your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. I'm sorry, this is Romans chapter 12, and that starts at verse 9. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need and practice hospitality. Abide in the vine. Serve your people with love and honor, giving them dignity and respect. And you will see your media team transform before your very eyes into true worshipers of Christ, into whole worshipers of Christ. And they will elevate in their craft because they're free to be free. And when you free your team spiritually, creativity flows. And where that creativity flows, your department grows. Okay, so that's the message that I felt like the Lord wanted to share with you today. And we are so grateful you came in, tuned in. If you need to reach out to us for any reason or looking for a way to connect with our technology company to assess the needs of your organization, then please reach out. The email address is Michael, MICHAEL, D, at method-net.com. That's at method, METHOD, dash or the minus symbol, net.com. You can reach us there. And if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, go ahead and shoot us an email. We'll send that over to you. And we have a short little assessment that we can give that will let you know the status of your network and your resiliency of your program and how we can help you streamline some of your technology to make that process easier.
Thank you guys, and y'all have a blessed day.
And that's a wrap.